When we hear the name Focal Utopia, we immediately think that these are gigantic speakers for hundreds of thousands of dollars. But in fact, Utopia is not just speakers. It's a whole line including 4 floor standers, 1 bookshelf speaker, a central channel speaker and a subwoofer. But today we're taking a look at some of the friendliest and coziest speakers in the ruthless high-end audio segment. This is truly a masterpiece of speaker design and the most humane-priced Utopia branded floor standing speaker. My name is Eugene, let's jump into it. The history of the line began in 1995, when the first Grande Utopia speakers were released. After 7 years, in 2002, Utopia was equipped with the famous Focal Beryllium tweeter. And in 2008, Focal began collaborating with the Pinot and Le Porcher Design Bureau, which gave Utopias their current look. Thanks to this, you won't confuse them with any other speakers. So, Scala Utopia 3 EVA is the basic floor-standing speaker of the Utopia line, which is already the 3rd generation. Despite the fact that they are formally at the foot of the Great Mountain Utopia, everything here is done without compromise. These are the same legendary Utopias, an icon, but in the most compact floor-standing form factor. And right away, so that you understand the scale of this compactness, each such speaker weighs 85 kilograms or 187 pounds. And here's a paradox. We weigh the same with it, but at the same weight, French elegance and magnificent style is only found in them. As with some supercars, the coolest and most uncompromising audiophile technologies are skillfully woven here. So yes, this is one of the audiophile supercars, but while supercars are associated with inconvenience, with some sacrifices for the sake of style and speed, the Scala will require almost nothing from you. Nothing but an impressive amount of money. But this is a relative question, because they cost more than 5 times cheaper than the big Grande Utopia. If we look at them closer, we will see that this is a real Utopia with an expensive and elaborate design. Each frequency range has its own separate isolated case, and in some places the thickness of these MDF panels reaches 2.4 inches or 60 millimeters. This combination of thick front panels, extensive internal bracing and curved panel shapes, all made from MDF, is called gamma structure. This design is good both from an acoustic point of view, since it allows the emitted sound to be smoothly reflected around the cabinet without secondary radiation from the sharp edges of the cabinet, and from the structural point of view, since curved panels are more rigid than regular flat ones. By the way, an interesting story. To finish the cabinets of these speakers, Focal has acquired an exceptional batch of Centennial Walnut from the Ain region. Thanks to the unique skills of Focal cabinet makers, the entire batch has been meticulously crafted. You can order the unique Scala Utopia in the most luxurious 100-year-old walnut finish. This particular finish is called Noyer Naturel, and there is also a dark walnut veneer option. But if this alien to you, you can order this in chic British racing green or any other color without wooden sidewalls. So, the expensive cabinets of these beauties are divided into 3 isolated sections, which are located at different angles. This is to ensure that speakers that are tall enough will radiate sound right at you. At the top is an outstanding mid-range driver housing with an impressive 6.5-inch mid-woofer. This is indeed one of the best Focal drivers, with very sophisticated design that concentrates important French technologies. Firstly, of course, these are branded W cones, a sandwich made of thin layers of fiberglass, the space between which is filled with damping foamed DuPont material named Rohacell. Here it is the blank of this diffuser. Here you can see fiberglass with fine weaving. And then they are cut out with a laser and they become like this, and Rohacell is visible here. According to the French, fiberglass is better suited to create fast and stiff cones than other aramid fibers or Kevlar due to the fact that the fibers are much thinner. The weaving is less, and the molecular bond of glass and resin is much stronger, which means a uniform structure of this cone. In addition, fiberglass means better control of signal transmission speed and no coloration, as this material performs better in motion due to less weight. Plus, it's stiffer and flexes less. This diffuser doesn't really bend. Even this one with one layer of fiberglass is difficult to bend, it's quite rigid. But this is just the tip of the iceberg. Its suspension uses TMD, Tuned Mass Damper technology. This innovation only appeared in the EVO generation. Here, the suspension has a special tubular ring that helps control resonances, drastically reducing distortion and maintaining high resolution. Another important technology is hidden in its bowels, the NAC, Neutral Inductance Circuit. This is a special Faraday ring that allows you to make the magnetic field no longer dependent on the position of the voice coil, the amperage or frequency of the current passing through it. And in the very depth of this driver is the power flower, a fanciful magnetic system. 6 magnets arranged like petals in a circle around the center. The history of the origin of this technology is interesting. Once upon a time, 20 or even more years ago, focal engineers were developing a woofer with very high efficiency. To do this, they needed an unusually large ferrite magnet, which of course wasn't at hand. Instead, several double-stacked ferrite rings had to be distributed around the voice coil. Not only the required magnetic energy achieved this way, but also due to the free circulation of air between the magnets, a very desirable cooling effect appeared right from the outside of the coil. In practice, it turns out that the more intensely the driver moves, the more air is forced through these open vents and the more intensive the cooling of its voice coil. But why does it need to be cooled down? The benefit is that the voice coil itself can take more amps from the amplifier, both continuously and on impulse. This results in lower thermal compression, less distortion and higher dynamics. And that's not all. Since the design is much more open, less compression will be created when the cone moves, which means that it moves much more freely. That's how many benefits this one chamomile gives. Furthermore, in the middle part, highlighted in color, is the famous focal beryllium tweeter with an inverted dome. An amazing driver that spans over 5 octaves. Every time I come across it, my mood even rises in anticipation of how I will now listen to music. Focal took years to develop this driver, but the result was worth it. After all, beryllium is an ideal metal for a tweeter. It is 2.5 times lighter than titanium, but 7 times harder for the same mass, and beryllium is the only metal that can scratch glass. In addition, it has simply outstanding damping, the sound wave from it traveling 3 times faster than titanium and 2.5 times faster than aluminum. Here it is, just look. It's just like a dry leaf floating in the air. That's what beryllium means. There is nothing better than a visual demonstration. I'm not talking about recording the sound of the room on a microphone now. Just look at the performance of beryllium for yourself. But not only this is important here. This driver is built on the same principle as large speakers. The back of the dome and the space around it are completely open. This achieves a double advantage. A very low moving mass is maintained and the resonant frequency is reduced. And this is the key point. Distortion and aggressiveness are the most obvious signs of an insufficiently low resonant frequency. And here it is shifted to 528 Hz, far beyond the range of this driver, covering everything from 2200 to 40,000 Hz. So, in this separate section behind the diffuser, there is a small cavity which is connected to the exterior of the enclosure by a horn, damped by a special material with almost zero acoustic resistance. This is also a Focal's proprietary technology called infinite horn loading. Its purpose is to absorb sound waves from the rear of the tweeter to ensure that the ultralight beryllium dome doesn't have compression obstacles when moving, doesn't create pressure inside the chamber, otherwise it won't realize all its capabilities. Now the heaviest part of the speaker, adorned with this gigantic 10.6-inch woofer. It has the same W composite cone as the midrange driver. But here the geometry is completely different, as you can see, because the requirements for the woofer, of course, are somewhat different from the requirements for the midrange driver. And just imagine how strong this driver is, how much energy it radiates. All the power of its magnetic system must be transmitted exclusively to the cone and nowhere else. If the speaker vibrates, even imperceptibly to the eye, this means energy loss and, as a result, sound deterioration. A good cabinet should resist this through inertia and rigidity. To deal with the vibrations, Focal turned to leading French specialist, the European leader in vibration control. They created computer vibration maps of these cabinets, which made it clear that not everything is solved by mass and wall thickness. As a result, thanks to computer analysis, special struts and baffles were designed and ideally placed, which turned out to be the most effective in combating vibrations and significantly increasing the rigidity of these cabinets. And for dessert, some audiophile suites. The Utopia range is the only one from Focal that provides a 2-cable connection. And of course here they installed the coolest terminals made by WBT. On the sides of the terminals are jumpers, switching which you can adjust the response of low and high frequencies in the range of ±1 dB. This can be quite helpful. Firstly, this way you better adapt the speakers to your room, and secondly, you can simply give more or less weight to the bass or say emphasize or reduce the treble. Such an opportunity to adapt to your tastes is very captivating, and of course I took advantage of it. I turned down the bass response to my taste, since I'm not a very big fan of strong basses, and therefore when there is a little less bass, I like it more. Well, and a smaller but not least audiophile choice. Inside, all the wiring is done with some specially selected French high-end cables with a cross-section of 4 square millimeters, and on the base the cable cross-section is as much as 8 millimeters. And also look at what spikes come with them in the kit, it's really far out. What is the sound of these mini Utopias? Paired with Class A monster amps, here it is the Delta preamp and matching Delta stereo power amp with the Marantz CACD30N player as a source. First it is of course the scale. These speakers deliver a lot of big, well-defined sound in this rather big room. But at the same time, they don't sound like super audiophile streak monsters. Scala Utopia remain comfortable speakers. In this regard, they just reminded me of Sopra, which I really like, but here it happens at even higher level. On the one hand, there are more details, the scene is being built on a larger scale, but this soulfulness here is at least no less. There is an attraction, magic in the sound of these speakers. They sound very emotional, they literally beckon you. Here is an interesting Canadian rock band called Crown Lands. In my opinion, they successfully experiment with both classical and progressive rock. They released the White Buffalo EP in 2022. 4 gorgeous, breathtakingly beautiful tracks, the last of which is a whopping 13 minutes long. The title song of the same name will, in a good way, remind you of the best years of Led Zeppelin, but won't remind you of Greta Van Fleet. That is good in my opinion. Another good news is that the Canadians are well recorded and you will hear it. Scala Utopia are very dynamic, they will gladly throw rampaging Canadian hairy men at you. Here they sound white, detailed and with an extremely pleasant temperature. There is some kind of solar warmth in the sound. You immediately feel the magic of a calm ethnic intro on the first track, relax and suddenly find yourself in the middle of a stadium rocker bang. And the action is like it's all literally falling down on you from heaven. Wow! Be sure to listen, this is not the whizzing of a shabby Marilyn Manson. However, I must say that these speakers lack some malice. More precisely, this particular music doesn't require it, but all the heaviest moments that are here are sounded so kindly, sincerely, and even too comfortably. They evoke mixed feelings in this regard. On the one hand, rock music should usually sound more viciously, but on the other, these speakers didn't give up or mess up anywhere. That is, formally, they reproduced everything exactly and quite quickly, creating an impressive mess of sound and all that. However, it all sounded with some kindness. Pretty unusual, but amazingly beautiful. Well, the strangeness of the week. Quite by accident, I stumbled upon a certain A. Browns, who, as it turned out, had already worked with such stars as Seal and Andrew Bird. In general, Abe is a drummer, and he released his solo album, where he, you don't believe it, drums. Judging by the cover, he has 3 drums, a cymbal and 2 tambourines. But there are also some synthesized sounds and noises in the album. In general, it's quite funny, and in some moments it all sounds very tasty and intricate. In this regard, Scala Utopia is probably one of the best tools for listening to all that weird stuff. These speakers are amazingly attentive to subtleties, and thanks to this, you very clearly feel the texture of the instruments. Some hidden nuances in the sound of drums, which are usually hidden behind the layering of solo instruments, can be heard. And here the drums are the main vocalist, around which everything else soars. And an interesting effect. The voice, deliberately distant from us, is far enough away, and it seems that you are sitting on the floor near the drums, and Abe himself is somewhere there, behind and above. You feel quite surrealistic, as you have shrunk like Alice. And Scala know their stuff. It would seem, drum with their big woofers and that's it. But of course not, it's not that simple. These speakers lay out sounds in space like chess pieces, and you literally feel at which point in space the drumsticks are beating. It's just stunning. Everything here infinitely crosses space in different directions. Well, I saved the coolest thing for last, an incredibly cool live recording. In the summer of 1961, Count Basie and his orchestra at their peak played at New York's iconic Birdland jazz club, which Basie considered his musical home. And this is a live recording of 2 of those Basie nights in Birdland. The best live recording of his big band ever. God, listening to this on these amazing speakers is mind-blowing. I won't even tell you how exceptionally the scene is visualized, how liquid and lively the sound is here. I think that even without my chatter, something tells you that the famous Utopia will blow your mind in a good way. Of course, this is an incredible effect of presence. You are simply transported to the New York in 1961, right in the same Birdland. The record breathes this club, and these speakers breathe it all right into me. Magnifique focal. These are amazing speakers. They're full of… well, they're not full. They're high-end audiophile tech embodied in this insanely beautiful oyster white case. They represent the French vision of the highest quality sound. It's really impressive because it's the most massive, really big and pedantic sound, with all the subtleties in which you can hear everything that hardcore audiophiles love so much. The difference in the violin model, how the drummer scratched his nose, and all that. But that's not why people fall in love with these speakers. Scala Utopia sounds amazingly easy, but not lightweight. accurate but quite soft, with its own unique character that is completely incapable of hurting you. And yes, if you are a hardcore audiophile who prefers to listen to heavy metal music at its maximum, then these speakers are probably not for you. They don't have so much malice. These speakers, on the contrary, are amazingly cozy musically, and if you listen to any other genre, then their unique pleasant character will captivate the sound of your favorite music the most.